apologize for my voice. I left it on the banks of a green river in Chicago this weekend. Our annual St. Patrick's Day march with lake effect snow. It was a day to remember. But it's an honor to be here. I want to thank the National Humanities Alliance and the National Endowment for the Humanities for inviting me. It's a distinguished crowd. Let me acknowledge Courtney Chapin, the pride of Winnetka, Illinois, and the White House liaison of the National Endowment for Humanities. Steve Kidd, thank you, as Executive Director. And I want to acknowledge a few people. Christina Velitis, where are you sitting, Christina? Labus, she is the Executive Director of the Illinois Humanities Council. Thomas Burke, with the Alice Kaplan Institute for Humanities at Northwestern University. I don't know if there he is, good to see you. And two remarkable women you're going to hear from after me. Amy Thomas Elder, the Academic Director of the Odyssey Project, which I'll say a few words about, and Star Perry Braddock, one of the Odyssey Project's great success stories. Let me digress for a moment and speak about an issue relating to education and justice, inspired by the humanities. I just see Jim Leach coming in the room, my former colleague in the House, my friend from Iowa. Jim, thank you for all you've done. It's my pleasure to count you as a friend. 12 years ago, I got a call in my office in Chicago. We have something called the Merit Music Program in Chicago, which is an amazing program. A woman left some money and said, take this money to the poorest schools in Chicago, offer children there instruction in music and free musical instruments. Well, her legacy lives on, 100% college placement rate. All of the students who go through the Merit Music Program do quite well. Well, there was a student there who was destined for greatness. She was Korean, and she'd been accepted at Juilliard in the Manhattan Conservatory, and in filling out the application, turned to her mother when it said nationality and said, what am I supposed to put here? Her mother said, I don't know. I brought you here at the age of 2 on a visitor's visa. We've never filed any more papers. I don't know what to put. What can we do, she said. Call Durbin. So they called our office, and we checked on the law, and the law was quite clear. Though she'd lived here in America for 15 or 16 years and had done quite well despite a very poor family and was now an accomplished pianist, the law said she had to leave and go back to Brazil, which was the country she'd come from, Korea, Brazil, US, and wait 10 years and try to come in. Didn't sound right to me. This girl had done nothing wrong. She didn't vote on whether the family should come to America. And so I introduced a bill called the DREAM Act, and that was 12 years ago. It was an effort. It was an effort to give these young people their chance, let them prove themselves. As for this young girl, Teresa Lee, thanks to the benefactors in Chicago, she finished the Manhattan Conservatory. She married an American and is now safely here from an immigration point of view, and she's played in Carnegie Hall. She is working on her PhD in music. She will make life a lot better for a lot of people because she was given her chance. So last year, President Obama, a friend who, as a senator, co-sponsored the DREAM Act, issued an executive order deferring deportment of these DREAM Act eligible students. It took courage for him to do it. Over 450,000 have signed up already, and there'll be more to follow. Now I'm working with a bipartisan group of senators almost every day to do a comprehensive immigration reform bill. And as the son of an immigrant mother, a naturalized citizen herself, I believe immigration is the definition of America. It is our diversity. It's who we are. It's who we're going to be. And so I thank all of you for standing up for the DREAM Act. You were some of the first members of the DREAM Act Coalition. And I also want to talk to you about another matter, though, much larger. Many of you are, many of whom, a large group of folks, I should say, many of whom are just as hungry for knowledge as the dreamers. What prevents many of these people from acquiring an education is not a question of immigration or citizenship, it's a question of poverty. Many of these people come from generations of poverty. Others have fallen into poverty because of bad choices or bad luck. For many of those folks, just getting by day to day is a struggle. They try to care for their families, keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. It's overwhelming. They don't have time or the money to go to college or visit museums, let alone think about Plato. Nearly 20 years ago, a man named Earl Shorus asked himself an important question. What if poor people were given a chance to study the great questions and great works of human history? Could an understanding of the humanities help to break the cycle of poverty? Well, let me tell you about Earl Shorus. Born in Chicago, moved to El Paso, Texas with his family when he was a kid, then moved back to Chicago to attend the University of Chicago on a full scholarship at the age of 13. In his 20s, he did a lot of things, including working as a newspaper reporter and even a brief stint as a bullfighter in Mexico. Quite a Renaissance man. In his 30s and 40s, he worked as an advertising executive, handling accounts for General Motors and AT&T. But he gave up that life to become a prolific author and a true intellectual. In 1995, while researching a book on poverty, Earl Shorus visited New York's Bedford Hills prison. And a female prisoner made an offhand comment that led to a great thought. She said that the way to help people escape poverty is to show them what she called, quote, the moral life of downtown. Museums, theaters, concerts, lectures. Introduce poor people to the humanities so they can reflect on the world instead of just reacting to whatever force is turned against them. Earl Shorus heard the comment and took heart. He decided to test this radical notion by creating a course patterned after the great books model of higher education that had influenced him at the University of Chicago. The idea was to teach many of those great books using the Socratic method and the caliber of faculty that students might encounter during their first years at great universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or the University of Chicago. The only admissions requirement was the ability to read a newspaper and an income of no more than 150% of poverty. Students met 2 evenings a week for 10 months to study the ideas of Plato, Kant, Shakespeare. The course was taught in conjunction with Bard College. Students who finished received 6 hours of college credit at Bard. It was held at Roberto Clemente Family Guidance Center in the East Village of Manhattan, hence its name, the Clemente course in Humanities. Of the 25 students who started that first Clemente course, 16 graduated. A year later, 10 of the first 16 Clemente course graduates were attending 4-year colleges or nursing school, and 4 had received full scholarships to Bard. All of the rest, save 1, were attending community colleges or working full-time. And that one, well, she was fired from her job as a fast food restaurant worker when she tried to start a union. Since the first Clemente course was offered in 1995, the idea has spread. All told, more than 10,000 students worldwide have attended a Clemente course. Today, versions of that course are taught on 5 different continents in communities as diverse as Melbourne, Australia, Seoul, South Korea, and indigenous communities in Mexico and Alaska. And there are also versions in more than 30 communities, rural and urban, across the United States and Canada. I know you're going to hear a little later from the newest bright star in the Senate firmament, Senator Elizabeth Warren, but there's this great Clemente course in her home state of Massachusetts, which she will tell you about. 1,000 inspiring stories have come out of Clemente courses. Here's one. Students at a Clemente course in Charleston, South Carolina were in the midst of taking a test one evening. The fire drill sounded. The students picked up their exams, went outside, sat on the curb, and continued to write. That's how hungry they were for knowledge. Now I want to tell you about my favorite Clemente course. In Illinois, we call it the Odyssey Project. It's a program of the Illinois Humanities Council in partnership with the University of Chicago's Civic Knowledge Project, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Bard College's Clemente course in Humanities. Amy Thomas Elder has been the academic director since the program started in 2000. The Chicago Tribune, incidentally, featured her last month and called her one of the remarkable women of Chicago. That's an understatement. Odyssey Project classes are taught at several locations in Chicago, in English and Spanish, led by teachers from the University of Chicago, DePaul, the Art Institute, and Northwestern. There are also classes in Champaign, taught by professors at the university. Students who finish the first course can take a second-year course for additional credit. More than 600 students have completed the course. About half of those students end up at 4-year colleges. Sometimes there's a lag time between graduating from Odyssey and enrolling in college, as you might expect. The majority of Odyssey Project graduates are women and mothers, and that's significant because, of course, when you help and educate a mother, you are educating a child. The average Clemente course includes 30 students, costs about $50,000 for 30 students. That's for the entire 10 months. It includes everything: instructor stipend, textbook, copying and mailing, rent, childcare, bus and subway tokens, everything. Much of the money comes from the National Endowment for the Humanities through state humanities councils. That raises a question. In this time of deficits, can we really afford this? Earl Shores said, "Compared with unemployment, welfare, or prison, the humanities are a bargain." I agree. And studying humanities has a ripple effect. Clemente course students say they read more, and they read more to their children. They become better and more confident advocates for their children, their families, their communities, their values. Graduates are better prepared for college, so they're less likely to have to use financial aid and loans. There's also a great value to schools that partner with Clemente courses in their surrounding communities. At the University of Chicago, faculty who taught in the Odyssey Project were so enthusiastic about how they benefited from the experience, how their teaching improved, that the university created something called the Civic Knowledge Project. That's an incredible project that's connected the university to dozens of arts and humanities organizations on the south side of Chicago and brought hundreds of community members into contact with the university. So if you're looking for a way to do good for your university and your community, think about this. In 1965, Senator Claiborne Pell, the father of the National Endowment for Humanities, chaired a hearing on his bill to create the National Endowments for the Arts and Humanities. Among the witnesses was the head of the Atomic Energy Commission, a man named Glenn Seaborg. Here's what he said: "We cannot afford to drift physically, morally, or aesthetically in a world in which the current moves so rapidly, perhaps toward an abyss. Science and technology are providing us with the means to travel swiftly. But what course shall we take? This is the question that no computer can answer." We've witnessed phenomenal advances in computers since that day, but there still are, there always will be, urgent questions that computers can never answer. That's why the humanities will always be essential. I mentioned several reasons to support a Clemente course. Now I'm going to introduce you to one of the most compelling reasons: the appropriately named Star Perry Braddock. Star is a devoted mother of 4 and a graduate of Illinois' Odyssey Project, and if you'll watch this short video, you're going to learn more about her. Thank you all very much.
I was reading how the Odyssey Project, and I know what Odyssey is like a spiritual journey. It was an excellent name to call the project because it's an awakening. It's an intellectual or spiritual journey. I was so used to and conditioned to just living, just going to work, just feeding my kids, not being able to give them anything else but the bare necessities. Well, I thought I was doing fine. The Odyssey Project gave me kind of wings, you know. It opened up my eyes and my ears, and I can understand things. I found that I can articulate, I can think, and I can do things other than just sit and settle. My friend, she dragged me to the Odyssey Project, and once I got there, I was in love with it. I'm like, when I got there, I'm like, whoa, I'm at home.
You have now encountered Plato and Aristotle. What have they taught you that you didn't know before?
It began to be such an enlightenment experience for me and fulfilling. And you're craving to know and to understand and to apply.
Absolutely in itself.
Philosophy and critical thinking and writing. Those were my favorite parts. And the discussions and being able to be heard. They didn't tell you to shut up. They let you talk.
The good of man is an activity of the soul in conformity with excellence or virtue.
Right.
So to have a complete life, you know, a person would have to be the best that they could be, whatever that is.
That sounds about right.
Happiness is knowing that you are, in fact, achieving the kind of excellence that you're capable of, that you're living in such a way that allows you the fulfillment that you seek as a human being.
To sit in a room with everybody here and discuss books like these and walk outside and look up and say, damn, it's raining. Yeah. You know, as close to death as I was at one point, this is a blessing. I mean, this is This was just great. So
I'm now prepared to go out there and hold and grab on to things that I know I can do. In my work environment, I mean, they think I got some sense now. When I started at the Odyssey project, I was what they call, I used to make up beds and clean rooms and stuff like that. But now I'm the activities coordinator and next in line to be the supervisor of St. Francis Shelter. And which came, I believe, because of some things that happened in the Odyssey project. I didn't know that I could do it, but now I feel I can. It excites that palate, you know, and I know this is just the beginning. I want to go on. I want to further my education, not only for myself, but for my children. This whole big old world is out here, you know, and it's for me. It's for everybody, you know. It's ours, and we can do things in it. And I guess my whole thing is now I have something to give to it.
Hello, my name is Star Perry Braddock, and I'm here. Thank you. I've seen so many platforms that advocate the importance of education, educating the youth, especially in the humanities. And I do believe that this is extremely important, but there is an even more urgent issue that is upon us, and that is we have to first educate the adults, head of households, and caregivers. The Odyssey Project, a Clemente course in the humanities, has done just that. It educates adults, heads of households, and caregivers. Its premise is that liberal education is education to make people free. The key to freedom for my children is in me. You see, I have the key to give my children greater odds at being successful and productive citizens. I had to and have to be liberated. And the kind of liberation I'm talking about is not from physical imprisonment, but mental imprisonment. The limitations I lived in were so profound in my life that they became government and put boundaries around me. And being aware of this, I was diligent in making and working on passing those means on to my kids, which at the time I didn't know that I was limited in them. I was stagnating them, putting them in a standstill. I didn't know that. What needed to happen in me was liberation, because the means of survival I had mastered and inadvertently was passing on to my children was only effective in my immediate environment. It only worked where I was, my 10-mile radius. It wasn't good for anywhere else. While in the Odyssey Project, my mind began to expand as I read the great books, you know, the excerpts from excerpts such as Plato's Allegory of the Cave, which was one of my favorite excerpts. You know, I talk about how that book itself, or that allegory, just really was me. I was in that cave, and I had to be dragged out and see not only the shadows on the wall, but to see the actual things that I am a part of and that I can influence and move and put my kids in an influential way where they can be moved and be a changer in their community and even now nationally. Great books such as Twanza, the Woodcarver, where you can look at things and know because it is, it's meant to be. But you can dig deeper into a thing before it's created, because it's supposed to be that. And Camus, the absurd, meaning going on day to day, not, you know, just doing the same old things all day long and getting up and getting yourself ready, feeding yourself, your children, and walking and doing the same thing every day, going to work and making a living and then doing the whole thing the next day over and over again. And what's the meaning of it? You're just doing it and just going with the flow. My mind began to burst at the seams of my environment, and I was no longer just satisfied with existing, and it became an extreme emergency to think and to move outside of my environment. I felt my children's survival depended upon it. How has the Odyssey Project impacted my life? I am now the statistician for my worksite. I am an author, and I have a book that is published. My youngest son is playing basketball in school and is a prospect for many colleges to attend in the fall of this year's under a full athletic scholarship. And my daughter is now finishing up her first year of college. You see, the humanities, it opens up your mind. And I do believe that you have to educate the parent, the caregiver, that person who, in that child's life, who can ground them and put a fire under them to inspire them to want to study and want to learn humanitarian acts, to think critically, and to do those things. And without educating me, I could never push my children to be educated. And they would always stay in the box. And so now they can think out of the box. Thank you.
Thank you, Star. My name is Leela Hilton, and I'm the program director for the Clemente course in the Humanities. And I want to say on all of our behalf, we are delighted to be here today. And I think we were particularly honored to be part of the program that's part of the inspiration for you all to do the wonderful work and hard work that you're going to be doing tomorrow and the rest of the year to support the humanities. I'd like to thank the National Humanities Alliance and the National Endowment for the Humanities for inviting us here today, and especially Caitlin Green, Stephen Kidd, thank you, Stephen, Aaron Mosley, and Courtney Noble. They all gave us so much support to get us here today, so thank you so much for having us. Before I introduce the rest of the panel, I just want to put Clemente in a little bit bigger context, although Senator Durbin did a fabulous job, and I know he had to leave, but thank you for that. The year that Star graduated from her course in Chicago, she was one of hundreds of students in the United States, and those students were studying in tribal centers and community centers, in libraries and college classrooms, in prisons and community and tribal communities. These students are all remarkable students, and we know Star's story is an amazing story. But for a Clemente student, it's not all that unusual. We find over and over again that our students are just ignited by the power of the humanities, ignited by great art, by critical questions, by thinking and talking among themselves. We see with Clemente, and you'll hear this from some of our speakers, some amazing community partnerships are developed through the Clemente programs. In my small community in the Olympic Peninsula, Washington State, we have sort of turned the whole idea of anti-poverty programs around, and the justice programs in our community look at Clemente as a way for people to get out of the justice system. The social service community that basically funds safety net programs now looks at Clemente as a safety net for our community. This is the humanities changing the communities, and you'll hear these kinds of stories over and over again. You'll also hear today that teaching Clemente and being involved in Clemente changes the teachers and the directors and the programs that offer Clemente. Most of us who've been involved with it have been involved from the beginning of our programs, and I think probably they're going to have a pensioners home for Clemente faculty and retire, for all of us to retire to eventually someday. One of the issues that came up this morning in some of the discussions was that notion of skills training versus education, and we certainly believe that education is the key out of poverty. Skill training is important, but it's not all there is. And again, in my small community, we have so many students who go on to start small businesses that our local Economic Development Council has written a grant to start a small business incubator for Clemente students. They see these students as a viable part of our community. And we just are very proud of that and supporting that. I'd like to introduce the rest of the panel. Amy Thomas Elder, who has been the director of the Odyssey program in Illinois since its inception. Timothy McCarthy was the director of the Dorchester program, and he still teaches there. David Tibaldi is the president of Mass Humanities and oversees several courses in Massachusetts. And Moyes Kofi is a graduate of the Poughkeepsie program, and he has also recently achieved his PhD. And you'll hear from all of them. Amy, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the kinds of institutional partnerships that go into making a Clemente course to kind of help you think about whether you're part of any institutions that might be interested in being part of one. The Illinois Humanities Council, looking at some of the work that was being done in Massachusetts as well as in New York, decided to bring the Clemente course to Illinois in 2000. And what the IHC has found is both that it's a continual source of excitement and interest on the board and all of our supporters. There also has led to lots of long-lived associations with the University of Chicago. Northwestern has also been our partner through the Kaplan Center. We have a lot of people teaching at DePaul, and from DePaul, and it brings a sort of whole new level of connection for all of us and for the institutions that work with us. But then there are also the community partners, the community centers where the courses are held, and our supporters. The Field Foundation, for instance, will only give a grant for 3 years. So we get a grant for 3 years, and then we take a year off, and then we get a grant for 3 years. And it's, I mean, so far we've been really lucky in being able to do that, but it's the kind of program that people don't just do once and walk away from. It's something that, as Leila was saying about the faculty, but all of our partners find it to be something that continues to grow and deepen and broaden our conception of humanities in public life. The University of Illinois has grown into an ever greater relationship with the Clemente course. They're working now to try to work with the local schools to partner with to help parents be better advocates for their kids' education through the Odyssey project. And one of the things that we see all the time is that Clemente opens a way for people who might be intimidated by some of our institutions to get into them, to sit down in a classroom with faculty from Northwestern or the University of Illinois or from the University of Chicago and have these teachers ask them, you know, well, what do you think? What do you think Socrates is talking about when he says an unexamined life is not worth living for a human being? You know, what do you think? And what we find is our students have tremendous life experience seeking a context, a historical context, a global context, a philosophical context, so that one of my students told me last week that she got out of an abusive relationship because she read Hegel. And you know, she read all of this like lordship and bondage stuff, and she said, no, I don't want to do that anymore. You know, I'm gonna demand recognition as a human being. And it's like, you know, obviously she had something inside of her already, but coming to philosophy and literature and art, as students do in the Clemente course, I think allows for a creative kind of reflection on their lives that really, really does change people's lives. I know everybody's always talking about changing people's lives, but it really is the case that the kind of fire that you play with every day really is fire. And I think that's something that our faculty see when they get into the classroom too, that it's not that it isn't interesting and fun and fascinating, but you get in a classroom full of really serious adults who want to change their lives, want to change their children's lives, want to change their community's lives, come into a classroom with a degree of moral seriousness that I've never seen in any of the other contexts that I've taught in, including the seminary. And it is, you don't know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen, but something always happens. And the experience of working with students motivated in the way that our students are is, it's transformative for me continually. I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who can talk more about the experience of a teacher in the classroom.
Oh, am I coming up there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I wasn't ready for my cue. I apologize. I want to talk a little bit today about, my name's Tim McCarthy, and I teach American history and politics at Harvard University at the Kennedy School of Government, and also I am the former director of the Dorchester Clemente course, which we call the Boston Clemente course, but it's located in Dorchester. Dorchester actually is about the same size as Cambridge, and so I have sort of two homes in the Boston area, one in Cobman Square and the other one in Harvard Square, and my life for the last 12 years or so has really been about this sort of two-way street between these two communities that I call home. And so I want to talk a little bit about what it's been like to be in those classrooms and what the relationship is with the faculty who teach in this Clemente program in particular, understanding that it may be particular to our program, but many, many stories that are common exist all over the country when we talk to folks who have been part of these programs. You'll hear, as you've already heard from Starr and you'll hear from Moyes, the impact that this has had on the students. And I can certainly say, and David Tibaldi is also going to talk about a longitudinal study that the Mass Humanities has commissioned in Massachusetts to study the long-term impacts of the students who have taken from and graduated from our courses in Massachusetts. And so I'll leave those stories of impact to those three distinguished colleagues. But I want to talk a little bit today about the faculty perspective. Our program has been part of an amazing partnership in Massachusetts with Mass Humanities, who helps to fund and sponsor our program, with Bard College, who accredits the program and allows our students to get earn 6 college credits when they graduate. It's also a partnership with the Cobman Square Health Center in Dotwell, which is this amazing award-winning community health center in Dorchester and Cobman Square in Dorchester. And it's also a partnership, of course, between all of the students who come from Dorchester and the surrounding communities, and also of the 5 faculty members who teach in the course, myself and Jack Chang, who's our art historian. Jack and I have been partners in this enterprise since the very, very beginning. Our course was founded 1 month after 9/11, and I like to say to anybody who comes to anything related to Clemente and Dorchester, that's one of the few positive things that I can remember in a post-9/11 world. And we were one of these programs that really thrived in the sort of aftermath of a great national tragedy, and sort of took off and have been headed in a really positive direction ever since. Our 5 faculty members, who represent 5 different disciplines, teach at 5 local colleges and universities in the Boston area. We are not officially affiliated with any one of those universities, so we are faculty members who have come from those colleges or come from those colleges and universities to teach in the program. And so I want to talk a little bit about the impact that that's had on all of us. And I should say that all 5 of us have been teaching in the program for at least half a decade, and Jack and I since its inception 12 years ago. The impact on the faculty has been unbelievable, to say the very least. And you know, we all have, as we like to joke, about day jobs where we teach our various disciplines and our various courses to students at colleges and universities: Suffolk University, Cambridge College, Tufts University, UMass Boston, Assumption College in Worcester, and Harvard, where I teach. If I were to sort of break it down into sort of 3 basic sort of impacts that we've had or we've taken from this, and we all teach Clemente, we call it a calling, not a career. All of us have these so-called day jobs, which give us an enormous sense of frustration. And one of the things that we all, we're all in different places in our careers. Some of us are struggling for tenure. Some of us have been assured we'll never get tenure. Others of us have gotten tenure, and we think that maybe they haven't figured out what they've done. So we're all in these various stages in our careers. But when we talk about Clemente, we all talk about it as a calling. as something we do in addition to our careers, but it's the thing that brings us the most joy. When I think about the three major things that we've all taken from this, and we talk about this all the time, about how Clemente has impacted our lives. First, Clemente has made us better neighbors because it's taught us the value of making a long-term commitment to educational opportunity and equity in the neighborhoods where we live. It's also improved so-called town-gown relationships with local colleges and universities and the communities that surround them. Colleges and universities which often seem out of reach and off limits to the students who are in our Clemente courses. In other words, in our own small way, we're trying to be part of the solution and not the problem created by too many universities, alas, by helping to build bridges across the artificial boundaries that too often divide our individual destinies and our common dreams. Second of all, Clemente has made us all more effective scholars and teachers because of the insights and the debates and the discussions and the challenges that happen in our classes, in student papers that we receive, in discussions that we have with students way outside of class. I'll just give you one easy example. The 10th anniversary of my first book, which was a documentary history of the American radical tradition called The Radical Reader, is coming out in the fall. And I initially sent the manuscript out to a whole bunch of colleagues in the field for suggestions about how to revise the original book. And then I realized that I had some great editors and colleagues in my Clemente courses, and I've actually changed a whole bunch of things that are in that book because my students have said, this document doesn't make sense. I like a better excerpt from Tom Paine's Common Sense than the one you chose to include initially, and so on and so forth. They've even helped me revise some of the front matter to explain and contextualize the documents for students so they can understand them. And so that's one real tangible, my book will be better when it comes out because my students in Clemente have forced me to rethink it. And then the third impact that we have experienced is that Clemente has made all of us more enlightened citizens because of the relationships that we've cultivated over the years, not only with each other, but certainly with our students, have deepened our reserves of empathy and increased our outrage by broadening our understanding of poverty, of discrimination, and equality that exists both in the ivory tower and way outside of it. For me personally, as an American historian, but also as a blue-collar kid who had the privilege to go to white-collar schools, Clemente has opened up exciting new ways of thinking about how we can connect the history of this nation with its present-day realities and challenges. It's also given me regular time to reflect on those twice-weekly drives between Harvard Square and Codman Square and back again, on how to connect my university work with my community work. All of this has produced over the years something of a profound revelation in my own life, that these distinctions between the university and the community are far less meaningful to me now, and that the real value of my life and our lives as humanists and human beings will ultimately be measured by the solidarity we keep with all those who dream of a great education, whomever and wherever they are, rather than by the status any of us achieve at educational institutions so often known for their greatness. For me, the humanities has been a two-way street, a constant back and forth, and it must remain that way. People often ask me why we teach the humanities, and it's a good question, especially in these tough times and with a new global economy that has transformed the way we interact within it. And of course, insofar as the Clemente course is concerned, when people ask me, why do you teach the humanities, they often mean another question, which is, why do you teach the humanities to, quote, these people? And my answer is the same to both of those questions, because we must teach the humanities to everyone. As I said in a Clemente commencement address 2 years ago, the humanities are essential to living well in this world. And by well, I mean justly, not selfishly. After all, no self-respecting humanist has ever destroyed an economy, or started a war, or presided over a genocide, or caused an environmental crisis, or denied people their God-given human rights. On the contrary, by definition, humanists value the human and aspire to be humane. And let me close with a story about that two-way street that I was talking about. Several years ago, I got early to class. Our class starts at 6 o'clock. I got there at about 5:30, and all the students were already there except for one or two. and there was a buzz in the classroom. And we had been studying the pamphlet wars of the American Revolution, the different debates that took place in print culture and in public spheres that helped to hasten and bring about the revolution. And then we had had a week about the antebellum reform movements that had emerged in the decades before the Civil War, movements for common schools and abolition and women's rights and the like. And the students said to me, we want to have class tonight, but there's a meeting in the Great Hall, which is this great public space across from the Codman Square Health Center where we had class. And they said, we want to go there because we want to help to protest the budget cuts that were coming down from the governor, Romney, and the state legislature at the time. And they said, we want to go to this because we want to be like the people we've been reading about for the last several weeks. And so I said, but we have to have class, you know, being the teacher and me, we have 2 hours of class, we have lots of material to get through here tonight. And they said, no, we'll come back to that. And I thought they meant the next week, but they meant later that evening. And so all of us together, the class and me, we went into the Great Hall and we protested those budget cuts that were coming, cuts that would ultimately affect the ability of the Codman Square Health Center and places like it across the state to provide things like the humanities to us. And we went to that meeting as a group, and then we came back as a group, and then they stayed until 9 o'clock at night discussing how the history of the American Revolution and the history of antebellum reform movements connected to the history of what we had just done in that aptly named Great Hall. And it was an amazing moment that I rarely have at Harvard, that I had there. And then they came in the next week and they had all started writing op-eds and letters to the editor, and they had a petition that they were drafting to their various state legislators who were going to vote on whether or not those budget cuts should come. And so they not just became students as they were, but they became more engaged citizens, and they dragged me along with them. In Dorchester, we like to define the humanities this way: the study of what it means to be human, so that we can all become more humane. It is a simple definition, one that's sustained us for 12 years, and there is power in that definition, power to change the world. Believe me, I've seen it. Class after class, text after text, student after student, year after year. We all have.
Good afternoon. I'm David Tibaldi, Executive Director of Mass Humanities, and I've been asked to talk about two things. One is why the State Humanities Council in Massachusetts got so invested in the Clemente course, and the other is to talk a little bit about the longitudinal assessment of the Clemente program, which was referenced earlier, and how it was structured and some of our findings. Before I do, I want to give a shout out to a couple of colleagues that I see in the room, just to say hello and acknowledge their presence. First, Edie Monza, who's Director of the Federal State Partnership at the NEH. Marilyn Whittington, my colleague from the great state of Delaware. Christina has already been acknowledged. Is Phoebe Stein still in the room? Phoebe Stein from Maryland. It's good to see you all.
She's from Illinois. She's in Maryland now.
Who did I forget?
She's from Illinois. She's in Maryland.
Oh, she's from Illinois originally. Trained under the great Christina Velitis, right? Some of you may know this already. When the State Humanities Councils were first established, beginning in the early 1970s, we were called Councils for the Humanities and Public Policy. We all were. The role envisioned for us by Congress as one of 5 divisions at the NEH was to, quote, demonstrate the relevance of the humanities to the contemporary conditions of our national life. That's directly from the enabling legislation. And it echoes the advice that the ambassador gave us at lunchtime, actually, that we begin thinking about applying the humanities and the social sciences to these kinds of larger social issues. We've been doing it, and state humanities councils across the country have been doing it for 40 years. We no longer call ourselves Massachusetts Foundation for the Humanities and Public Policy, but using history, literature, philosophy, and the other humanities disciplines to strengthen our democracy remains central to our mission. Historically, we've done this by developing and funding programs that bring the perspectives of these disciplines to bear on issues of concern to the people of our state, by using the humanities to illuminate social and political issues of broad public concern. We encourage civic participation and inform and enlighten our civic choices. It wasn't until Earl Shoris's wonderful Harper's Magazine article that came out in September of 1997, which kind of went viral among the state. This was before computers, really, but if there was a physical analog for going viral, Earl's essay certainly did, at least among state humanities councils. But before that article shifted our focus, we hadn't really thought of the humanities as a pretext for civic life itself. The humanities are not merely an enhancement or an enrichment of civic life. They are generative of civic life. You know, Earl Shoris, who we lost last year, his last book was just published less than a month ago. It's called The Art of Freedom, Teaching the Humanities to the Poor. And I think that's a wonderful way to think about the humanities. Soon after we became convinced of the power of the Clemente course to transform the lives of the people who complete the program, the Mass Humanities Board decided that in order to raise the considerable amount of money necessary to sustain and expand the Clemente course throughout the Commonwealth. By the way, we have invested almost $2 million in the Clemente course in Massachusetts since we first began in Holyoke in 1999. That's a huge amount of money for a small organization, and we are a small organization. But we knew that we needed to be able to demonstrate the lasting impact of the program for funders primarily, and not just corporate and foundation funders who demand this kind of thing. Even, you know, committed individuals want to know that it has a lasting impact. So a socially, scientifically valid, outcomes-based longitudinal evaluation was needed to document what we knew in our hearts to be true. The Clemente course changes lives for the better. Not only the lives of graduates, but the lives of their families, and just as importantly, the lives of their communities. The Center for Public Policy and Administration at UMass Amherst has a program through which local nonprofits can apply for assistance in addressing a problem that would be instructive for its graduate students to wrestle with. You may have similar programs at your institutions. In 2005, we requested help in designing a longitudinal study for the Clemente course, and we were accepted into the program. The study uses both quantitative and qualitative measures, an extensive survey, 54 questions, data from which can be coded and analyzed electronically, and an interview protocol for in-depth conversations of, quote, with, quote, a purposeful sampling, that's a technical term of art, of Clemente graduates. These face-to-face interviews typically lasted 60 to 75 minutes, and this was very comprehensive. The survey was administered in slightly varying forms at 4 different points of time: at the time of enrollment, upon graduation from the course, 12 to 18 months after graduation, and 3 or more years after graduation. The interviews, which were designed to enrich the survey data with narrative accounts of individual experience, like the wonderful experience you heard about earlier this afternoon, were conducted with a representative group of graduates from each class at graduation and at the 2 post-graduation points. A professional evaluation consultant was hired to collate and analyze the survey data, conduct the interviews, and write the final report, which is available on the Clemente course. You can just Google www.clementecourse.org, and you can find it there. It's like 65 pages. It's a lot of information there. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the part about the data. I want to say that out on the table there's copies of this newsletter, which is devoted to the Clemente course in Massachusetts, and some of the results of the study are presented in there. If you want, they're in the Q&A. I'm happy to talk more about that. Let me just say some of the general findings of the study. And also I want to say that this is, the way these findings are expressed are a little bit toned down. I'm not sure why. It's probably a professional thing, I don't know. But they, for example, it says a large majority. Well, a large majority it often is, 90%. 95%. Anyway, a large majority of graduates and alumni experienced positive changes in every area initially identified for goal and outcome measurements. Did I say what those areas are? Let me do that. I'm sorry. The survey gathered data on demographics and traced changes in these 4 areas: student self-esteem, engagement with the humanities, involvement in cultural activities, and civic participation. There are many other things that were tracked as well, but those were the 4 key elements. The Clemente course continued to positively affect a majority of students' self-esteem and self-confidence 3 or more years after graduation. It continued to help alumni foster their connection to the humanities, their self-knowledge, and their belief in their own potential to participate as citizens in a democratic society. A majority of Clemente alumni successfully pursued their own educational and life goals 3 or more years after completion of the Clemente course. 70% of alumni interviewed had completed college courses at a community college or 4-year college or university. All alumni expressed their intention to continue to pursue their education and other life goals in the future. This is a wonderful outcome, and we stress it when we're talking to potential funders, but I want to stress to you that although we really like it when this happens, it is not the primary purpose of the Clemente course to get people to go on to complete their higher education. It's really more about self-development and creating engaged and active citizens who become involved in the social and political life of their communities. That's our primary goal. This is a secondary goal, and it's a great one. And some students come into the course with this as their primary goal. They do get 6 college credits from Bard College that they can use to transfer to another institution. Finally, after taking the Clemente course, alumni have reported how their Clemente experience has helped them to make positive and constructive choices in order to live their lives differently. A majority of alumni gave examples of how they had continued to improve their own lives and the quality of life for their families, friends, and communities 3 or more years after graduation from Clemente. The study took place over a 5-year period. It involved Clemente classes of 2006, 2007, 8, 9, and 10 from 3 Clemente sites in Massachusetts. So it was quite comprehensive. So the data is very encouraging. As I said, you can view the report yourself on the Clemente website. I have to say for myself, as compelling as the data may be, it's not nearly as compelling as listening to someone like Starr or Moyes, who you'll hear from in a few seconds. The real power of the Clemente course is best expressed by the people whose lives have been changed by it. And with that, I'll turn it back to Leela. Thanks.
We have a little bit of time for some questions. One point I wanted to make, and Amy and I were talking about this before, is that we're seeing evidence that Clemente students who go on to college tend not to get caught in those remedial classes, which so many people in their demographic would be expected to, which of course saves the taxpayer a lot of money, but it helps students be successful in college because they're not spinning in those 98, 99 courses, using up their financial aid, and then dropping out before they ever get any college credit. And there are other outcomes that we're observing, and I think we would all love to hear from you and your expertise in this room to help us tell our story better and in different ways, to reach funders, to reach research organizations, and to develop this idea into something that's got maybe a little bit more defined metrics and outcomes. So we're hoping we'll hear that from some of you all today. But we would love to take some questions if anybody has any questions. And did you want to add anything? Okay. No? Okay. Any questions you can ask of any of us? No? Yes, we do. He was going to speak and introduce Senator Warren when she gets here. So we thought we'd just break because she's going to be a little bit late, so we just had a little time for questions. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that was having a conversation with a senior person at a foundation that does a lot of funding of educational research. We were not going to be eligible for getting money to do an evaluation, but somebody who really knows the field. And she asked me how much time the students devote to the course, both in class and out of class. And Star could probably see if I gave her a bum steer on this, but for example, every week it's 2 2-hour seminars, and I thought they were spending at least that much time, maybe more, outside of class to prepare. Exactly. Is that right? And she said, we should really make much more out of that. The commitment that the students are spending not only in class but outside of class for that length of time was really significant in in that kind of setting. So I just thought whether anyone else had heard that. We sort of take it for granted that that's what the investment is and don't look at it from kind of the outside. Right. By the way, this woman also said that she's been trying to all foundations want evaluation when they make a grant, but none of them pay for it, and that's kind of her, thing that she wants to change.
Right. Thank you. That's a good point. I can say from our perspective in my course, I have a small program on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, and we have 5 hours of class each week. We have a shorter semester because we live in a rural community, and seasonal employment makes it harder for people to work in the early fall and early spring. But I tell my students that for 5 contact hours in the classroom, they have to expect about 8 or 10 hours of homework a week, and they do it. I mean, it's hard for them, but they do it. Most of my students have jobs, part-time jobs, maybe 1 or 2. They're single parents mostly, and they make this commitment. And I have to tell you, as an educator, these are the students who come there every night because they want to be there. They can leave any time, and they're not going to have a GPA problem or have a financial aid problem. They are there because they are thirsty and they're passionate and they want to be there. And that's why we're there every night too, is because of the students. There was a question, I think? Yeah.
I hold the microphone, don't I? I'm Teresa Mangum from the University of Iowa, where I direct a Humanities Center, essentially. And I'm wondering 2 things. One is, how do faculty members prepare? It sounds like training would be very important to be part of the Clemente program. But if any of you could comment, I'd also really love to know what role Humanities Centers are playing in helping support the program or house the programs on their campuses, because I'd love to bring it to my campus.
Okay. Tim, you want to talk about faculty preparation?
I mean, are you asking, do they get a particular kind of preparation to teach, like in Cobham Square at the Clemente? Not really. I mean, one of the things that I will say, our faculty, there are 5 of us, and we've all taught in lots of different settings. So we've taught from some community colleges and GED programs in some cases, prisons, the Clemente course being another setting, and then all different kinds of colleges and universities, 2-year schools, 4-year schools. So between the 5 of us, we have a really diverse range of teaching experiences over the course of, in one case, 30 some odd years. And so what we've done is that we've tried to sort of come together. We have regular faculty meetings where we get together and talk about our own experiences. We write reports to one another over email after classes. We don't do that as diligently as we'd like to because we're busy, and sometimes that gets lost in the weeds. But we have moments where we're getting together. Either the faculty director is there every night, so there's always 2 faculty members present in every class. And so oftentimes that class will lead to a debrief and a conversation afterwards about, this student seems to be struggling in this way, or this student, spoke and talked in a way that they never had before, so this particular text must have inspired them. But we all teach exactly the same materials that we teach in our courses at the colleges and universities that we teach in. And so the idea that we would somehow, change the way that we teach or change what we teach by some kind of artificial notion of this class being profoundly different from other classes that where we teach the humanities, is something that we sort of rejected from the beginning, that what we want to do is make sure that every student population, every class that we have is its own class, just like any other class that we teach is its own class, and that we tailor our pedagogy, our instruction, our support, our lesson planning, and et cetera, to whatever the dynamic is of any given classroom. And we've seen over the course of 12 years that every year the dynamics in the classroom are very, very different. And so we haven't done any additional training for the faculty.
Thank you, Tim. Senator Warren is here, and so I'd like to introduce Moyes Kofi, who will tell you his story about his program in Poughkeepsie. He graduated in 2000. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Moyes Kofi, alumnus of the Bard Clemente course in the Humanities. I graduated from the Poughkeepsie site in May 2000. Today, it's an honor, a privilege for me to speak at this important event, to highlight and to share the result of the work of a great man. Mr. Earl Shorris was a journalist, social critic, a novelist, who is the founder of the Clemente course in the Humanities, course designed for people living in poverty. As an immigrant from the Ivory Coast, I came to this country in 1996 with a family of 4 people, and I started my life in the Bronx, working several hours daily in low-wages job that mostly required physical strength. One day I sat and said to myself, if it's true that I'm really who I choose to become, then I will feel guilty and accountable if I don't put myself and my family on the right path for success. I realized that knowledge was the only tool for me to fight poverty. About knowledge, Mr. Earl Shorris will say that knowing is better than not knowing, and he will compare educations in the study of the humanities to training in the learning how to operate a simple machine, because he thinks that it's better to teach the poor how to think than teaching him how to do things, because a man who knows how to think is even capable of creating more jobs. Then I grabbed the first opportunity that was offered to me to participate in the Clemente program, and it's provided me top quality education, the humanities, and excitement of learning in the college environment. We discussed about philosophy, literature, history, writing, which provided me new ideologies and better communication skills, since English is my 4th language. Then the sun started to shine in my life as a sign of a new beginning. However, whenever I tried to improve my accent, my kids would laugh at me. They would say, "Dad, stop. You don't have to change your accent, because whenever you try to do it, it becomes even worse. So stay like this and stop it." Throughout the programs, I enjoy learning about great philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and then I compare my life when I first came to the Bronx to the life of the prisoner in the Plato's allegory of the cave. After the completion of the Clemente program, I saw myself as a freed prisoner, but not a philosopher. The Clemente program put me on the right path for success and reshaped my life in several aspects. My mind was open, and I was determined to go to college to pursue undergraduate and graduate studies. In 2004, I started to work as an adjunct professor in local colleges and universities teaching mathematics and science. Since 2006, I found myself prepared enough to dare to take the position of a director of an educational program designed to serve 200 underrepresented and economically disadvantaged secondary school students at Hostos Community College. The writing skills that I acquired in the Clemente course allowed me to write 2 successful grants. The first one for the funding of the STEP program, which is the Science and Technology Entry Program for secondary school students, and the second grant, which is the collegiate component. And this, yes, for college students, to prepare them for transition to 4-year institutions. So we're providing them tutoring sessions about gateway courses. And that grant was the first one in the history of the college. The Clemente course shed light in my family. I was able to inspire and motivate my daughter, who is currently pursuing her undergraduate studies at Braddock College. When she went to college, she was having problems with the essay, 8-page seminar. So I was able to assist her to complete her assignment. Then I remember the word of prophecy of my philosophy professor, Professor David Shine, to the Clemente graduate in 2000, you will be able to help your kids in the assignment. Today, I feel proud and enthusiastic because maintaining daily balance between family, work, and research, I was able to complete my doctoral degree in mechanical engineering from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. I'm so grateful to Mr. Earl Shoris, the founder of the Clemente program, who has inspired me to take the right direction for my life. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to speak to him directly to testify the impact of his great work in the lives of several other people like me. I would like to thank Professor Shine, Dean of Studies at Bard College, Professor Van Zuylen, Director of the Clemente course at Bard College, and to all the sponsors of this wonderful program. In closing to this story, I will say this. The journey of our lives can be complicated, can be long and rocky. However, we can always overcome these difficulties by solving these simple life equations. MS is equal to MS, which means my success is equal to myself. Thank you. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, U.S. Senator Warren. She is the senior senator from Massachusetts. We are honored to have her join us this afternoon. We are excited to have her today to speak about the importance of guaranteeing a high-quality education for all Americans of all ages, including those who may not be able to access to college-level humanities courses without the support of programs like the Clemente course. Please give a warm welcome to U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Kofi. I very much appreciate the introduction. And there is nothing better for a teacher to hear than a testimony from a student. It warms my heart. And also the reminder of what this is all about. You know, it's a delight for me to be here at George Washington University because this is where I first came when I was 17 years old. The first time I had been north or east of Pryor, Oklahoma. And I came to GW, and so I want to thank you all for bringing me back here. Thanks to the National Endowment for the Humanities and National Humanities Alliance for inviting me here today. It really is the reminder that teachers were once students. It was in the next building over, Lisner Auditorium, which, as I recall it, when I was a student here, used to say that other groups could come in, use the auditorium. I don't know what all the financial arrangements were, but as I recall it, there were a group of seats that were always set aside for GW students. And my recollection is they charged $1 for each of those seats. It was in the next building over that I saw my first ballet. I saw my first modern dance. I heard my first string quartet. I heard my first symphony orchestra. I saw my first Shakespeare play. It was at the National Gallery of Art that I ever visited, my first art museum. It was being here at GW that doors opened for me in incredible ways. They changed my life, they changed who I am and what I do, and made me forever after a strong supporter of the humanities. So I say thank you for bringing me back here, and I offer my own testimony as a student. It was an amazing place to be. You know, with all the political fireworks here in Washington, the humanities are rarely at the center of attention. In the big public policy debates today, the focus is on economics, on data, on technical solutions, math, as people like to say. We talk about the constraints in our budget, about sequestration, about Social Security, about Medicare. We talk about tax loopholes and making tough choices. We talk about jobs and rebuilding infrastructure. And most of the time, that conversation is about how to make the math work. And I agree, we do have to make the math work. But budgets and public policy are about a whole lot more than just math. They're about our values. And that's where the arts and the humanities come in. As President Kennedy said, art establishes the basic human truth, which must serve as the touchstone of our judgment. The arts and humanities help us define our values as individuals and as a people. They show us the greatest truths in ways that science never could. Neuroscientists might be able to tell us what areas of the brain light up when our feelings of love or justice are activated. But they cannot help us understand love nearly as well as Romeo calling out to Juliet, or to understand justice nearly as well as Atticus Finch representing Tom Robinson. They give us insight into human passion and moral strength, deep suffering, and courageous struggle. The humanities also help us think critically. They help us challenge orthodoxy and imagine a better future. When we read great works of fiction and try to understand the past, or see paintings that make our hearts skip a beat, we're forced to ask why. Why we're inspired by Rothko or Rembrandt. Why a stable peace led to an unexpected war. Why heroes and heroines overcame their pride or paid a terrible price if they did not. Asking why, which is the core of critical thinking, is what puts us on the path to improvement. It makes us creative and innovative as individuals and as a people. And perhaps most importantly, the humanities give us hope, because they give us insight into great truths, and because they give us the freedom to think. They help us see that we too can make a difference, that we can aspire to something better. You know, in Massachusetts, we've seen the power of the humanities in inspiring people to act, to hope, and to build better lives for themselves and their communities. As Senator Durbin said earlier, and I think has been part of the discussion here, the writer Earl Shore has created a program called the Clemente course to teach the humanities in some of our inner city neighborhoods. Today in Massachusetts, with the support of the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Clemente course is offered in Holyoke, in Dorchester, and in New Bedford. And we've got faculty coming from many universities, including Harvard, BU, BC, Suffolk. They come to help inspire and to create opportunity. The effects, not surprisingly, are inspiring. Students who complete the course leave with greater self-confidence, with critical thinking and writing skills, and a deeper commitment to their families and their communities, and an interest, as you demonstrate, in continuing their education. As one graduate put it, it's a bridge from had I only to I can. In a democracy, there are a few things more important than the belief I can. In a democracy, we the people decide what our future is going to look like. We choose the kind of people we want to be and the kind of country we want to build. At the heart of it are the values we celebrate and that we work together to realize. The humanities remind us of our values and give us the ability to imagine a future in which we come closer and closer to achieving them. As individuals, the belief that I can is what empowers us to make our lives better. We're a nation of entrepreneurs and innovators, a people defined by creativity. And we are also a nation of immigrants and small business owners. We're a people who believe that we can build a life that's better than our parents' lives. The humanities nourish optimism and imagination that nourishes our aspirations. As participants in a global world, the belief that I can and we can increasingly depends on our understanding working with others. Economically, engaging people around the world is essential to growth and competitiveness. Politically, so many of our country's national security and diplomatic challenges depend on global interaction. The humanities open our eyes to language, history, and culture, which are vital to our relationships abroad. The poet and philosopher Schiller once wrote that if man is ever to solve that problem of politics in practice, he will have to approach it through the problem of the aesthetic, because it is only through beauty that man makes his way to freedom. Today, as we work to address the problem of politics, we will need to make the math work. It's important. But more than that, we will need to remember our core values. We will need to think critically, to challenge orthodoxy, and to imagine a future that reflects those values. And we will need to embrace the courageous truth that, as tough as the struggle might get, each of us can make a difference. In other words, we will need the humanities. Thank you all. Thank you.